Good day, folks. Today is a day of remembrance to a man who walked the talk silently. You'd say, how's that? Because generally, what he did, what he accomplished during first part of his when he was made the finance minister, how he turned the economy from a socialist state controlled economy and laid the foundations for a freer liberal economy, provided aspiration to millions of youth and entrepreneurs. And look at what he achieved. He shielded India from the 2008 global financial crisis, solidifying the historic Indo-US nuclear deal. This, in my mind, was a man who has strength in himself, right? Because he almost would have lost the government, but he didn't care because he knew the nuclear deal was critical for India, and which it is. Without that nuclear deal, folks, we would have been in the dustbin of history. This government, this PM, or any other PM could not have pulled us out of that dustbin, right? Then he had the right of education. He boosted our future by ensuring an average GDP growth of 7 to 8%. Now we got all this, and he brought relief to farmers with agricultural debt waiver. He did lots of things, amongst other things. It's got like a pit in my stomach because he's one of the reasons, actually he's one of the only reasons I came back in 92, 91, 92, because I saw the budget in 91. At that time I was a CFO of a US company in Europe, and the choice I made, I mean, besides the fact that I wanted to come back to my parents, was this, right? And yesterday was a sad day, right? I mean, you woke up and what did you see in every newspaper? You had Nation mourns former PM Manmohan Singh, the economist, ruler credited with liberalization. He, unbelievable, right? And this is the guy this current government abused constantly for being whatever, right? But then you can't hide the truth, right? Then you have Times of India, man who liberated India's dreams. The phone call that changed the nation. They call change the nation, right? Look at the words being used by Times of India, right? In 91, with India staring into an economic abyss, Manmohan Singh as FM transformed its policies and fortunes. If India now sits at the high table of nations, a lot of the credit goes to his great liberalization. That's what I'm telling you. In 2004, he was again brought in from the blue as PM, and first 5 years of which will be remembered far more favorably in the next five. But in the next five, unfortunately, a coalition of the media, I think probably to get back at because of the land acquisition bill, the corporates of India, who suddenly, I guess, took a dislike, Advani and Vinod Rai just destroyed this government and his reputation. He was unblemished, right? The great liberalizer, as written by Hindustan Times, former PM Manmohan Singh, who opened India to the world as finance minister before helming the US nuclear deal and a series of key legislations in the top office or 2 terms, dies of age-related illness. Tributes pour in for reforms icon from everywhere. Prime Minister of Malaysia. You see what's being written about him in the New York Times and Bloomberg, and I probably will read out the Bloomberg one. So what does Bloomberg write, right? It's India's quiet reformer taught a generation to dream, right? Written by Andy Mukherjee of Bloomberg. Manmohan Singh was the face of India's transformation as finance minister in the early 90s, and from 2004 as its prime minister for a decade. His reforms loosened excessive trade controls, opened up the economy, pulled millions out of poverty, and made the West accept the nuclear-armed nation as an ally. Go get that. Or at least that's how his legacy will be remembered globally. But to my generation of Indians, Singh, who died at 92 Thursday night in a New Delhi hospital, was above everything else the embodiment of hope. He instilled in us a strong belief that a market economy would work, not just for a tiny elite in New Delhi and Mumbai, but for a majority scattered across smaller towns and villages, battling against overwhelming odds of economic and education poverty and social discrimination. And that, folks, has changed. His own story gave us confidence. A 15-year-old Sikh refugee boy in newly independent India, whose family had fled from Pakistan during the subcontinent's 1947 partition. He went on to study economics at Oxford and Cambridge and built an impressive career. As a top technocrat, Singh and his colleagues were able to convince us that in a post-socialist, market-led economy, we too would be free to chase our dreams. With education and hard work, our lives too would be vastly better than our parents. Upward mobility would no longer be an exclusive, perverse preserve of the privileged. Through the 90s, the reform project stayed on track even as governments changed, but the promise started to fray during Singh's second term as Prime Minister. The unwieldy Congress-led coalition government he ran from 2009 to 2009 was besieged from one side by crony capitalists gorging on debt from state-owned banks, only to siphon off money into their Swiss bank accounts, which continues apace even now. From the other side, it was under attack by a political opposition that blamed Singh's indecisive leadership for rampant corruption, high inflation, slowing growth, and a falling rupee. And look where we are now, right? Because as you look at that, they blame, you see, rupee skids sharply before RBI applies brakes, has reached the lowest ever, right? It's crossed 85, it hit 85.70, it was going to hit 86 yesterday before the RBI stepped in, right? I do not believe that I have been a weak Prime Minister, Singh said in one of his last press conferences. Just a few months before the Hindu right-wing leader Modi's Bharatiya Janata Party swept the 2014 election, I honestly believe the history will be kinder to me than the contemporary media or, for that matter, the opposition in parliament. Absolutely. The world knows, right? That prediction didn't take too long to get tested. In November 2016, Prime Minister Modi banned 86% of India's currency overnight. Singh, who described the move as organized loot and legalized plunder, said it would crush economic growth, and he was right. With his death, India has been deprived of sage counsel at a time when growth is once again anemic. Policy making has become whimsical. Many industries are facing extreme concentration of economic power. The middle class is feeling the weight down by taxation, and the poor are being excluded from government programs in the name of plugging leakages. Religious strife is on the rise, and politicians of all hues are bribing voters to capture power where they can without sparing a thought for how best to use national resources for development. After 10 years in the top job, Modi's personality cult is weakening, but to his supporters, the belief in a prosperous India has become an uncritical act of faith, right? That wasn't the effect Singh intended when in his first budget speech in 1991 he channeled Victor Hugo. No power on earth can stop an idea whose time has come, he said. The emergence of India as a major economic power in the world happens to be one such idea. Well, India is now the world's fifth largest economy, on track to becoming the third biggest in a few years, but that's largely a statistical artifact. A product of extremely unequal growth that's making a tiny section of 1.4 billion people very rich. On average, is still a lower middle income nation with a per capita income of $2,500 last year, nowhere near South Korea's $35,000. Korea, which used to be as poor as India's 60s, inspired Singh's vision. He couldn't replicate the miracle of the Han in his lifetime. But a bigger worry is that New Delhi, lurching once again towards protectionist trade policies, is no longer even on the path to that goal. No longer, right? And that will be a shame if, by choosing to replace rational analysis with empty slogans and genuine reforms with nationalistic chest thumping, the country lets down the memory of its quiet internationalists, right? This is what was written about him in the Bloomberg. And look at what we have. And this is again Hindustan Time, how 1991 economic reforms changed India. Singh took over as finance minister when the economy was closer to sovereign default and completely altered its course. And even Prime Minister Modi, who was accused and abused him, he left a strong, was forced to come out and give and make sampark with the population of India finally. He left a strong imprint in our economic policy over the years. As our Prime Minister, he made extensive efforts to improve people's lives. Oh well, why didn't he think of that before? And this is the other thing he did, right? From nuclear deal to Quad, he left a lasting imprint on external relations. I came back because the economy was going to do a turn. It really did. But now look at this, right? One of the reasons that he was ridiculed was the rupee. Now, rupee is under pressure. Rupee remains under pressure, hits record low of 85.28. Rupee sees relative gain as other currencies fall more versus RBI. What a BS statement, right? What a real BS statement. That's like you're neither way. If you are stronger than the other currencies and you're still going down, means your exports are no longer competitive. So you don't win either way. Rupee hits record low for 6th straight session. Rupee closes at new low of 84.86 on global cues. Rupee's fall has not made India's exports more competitive. Obviously, it hasn't, because it's still not fallen as much as the other currencies, right? Rupiah pressure exporters likely to see limited gains. Absolutely, they've seen none. And the reason, folks, is not the Fed. It's our fundamentals. It's the demand for dollars within. In fact, it's the canary in the coal mine for the rest of the world. That dollar is in short supply, right? At nearly 38 billion, trade deficit hits record high, and that, folks, is the reason why the rupee is falling. The demand for the dollar in India, because it can't be met by exports, which are slumping at the lowest ever, you are in trouble, right? And then the other reason is this: easy on rara rupeeing. This writes Rathan Roy. Monetary policy is best crafted with analytical clarity, not muscular nationalism or simple binary. And that's exactly, unfortunately, what happened right here. What's happening here? To think analytically, we must first jettison communist talk of targets. We have believers in a strong exchange rate as evidence of a nation's economic testosterone, and then those who want to let the exchange rate float and free all capital control. Policy tradecraft involves the management of objective and conflict. This is best done with analytical clarity and credibility, and not by pandering to either muscular nationalism or simple binaries, which is what's happening, right? The other thing, at a fortnight FM who unleashed the animal spirits of Indian economy. Now look at what's happening everywhere, right? While the rupee is skidding, as the Economic Times, right? Then he says political bigwigs line up for the OG reformer. And you have Modi there too, right? Then you have anything else in the Economic Times? Yeah, you have something written by here. Manmohan is Make in India. India's 2025 stands on the bedrock India laid. The friend who turned out to be Manmohan, that's Ashok Desai. In 91, he asked me to join him in Finmin. I was surprised, for I had written columns criticizing the government. He was scrupulously honest and a great speaker, although he learned to make inoffensive speeches. Lucky to have been chosen to deliver, but deliver he did. This is Rathan Roy. He says, Singh was lucky to be chosen to deliver, yes, but deliver he did in substantial measure. From the vantage of the present, that's a big deal. And Bharat's Ratna, a patriot survivor who persevered. This is Ashok Malik. He says, exactly a month after Singh's death, India will commemorate Republic Day. A wistful sensibility would hope for Modi government to take an expansive, large-hearted call and name Singh for India's highest honor. The elevated spirit might be episodic, temporary and unreciprocated. The pride, prejudice and partisanship might remain just as cussed. Even so, it would be worth a shot, right? I think so. What did Hindustan Times write? Right? Hindustan Times is also all full of Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. And it's kind of amazing. Allies, rivals, global leaders pay homage to Manmohan. His journey embodied nation's resilient spirit. PM office. This is a PM, right? Till yesterday he was saying he had a bath with a raincoat, right? Luminous and beloved guiding light Sonia on former PM, right? And there's a huge coverage for him, right? It's important to know all this, right? And important that if this you have US EM Jaishankar discuss bilateral, the EM would have, EM also has been created under the Congress, by the way, folks. Sonia pays tribute to friend, philosopher, guide. Leaders pay last respect to former PM. India Inc. mourns reform architect. Therefore, abused him, right? I mean, it's like we have to blame them too. It would be a long way to find someone like MNS absolutely. Assam remembers a diligent tenant, true representative. At Delhi School of Economics, Singh's legacy lives on. From UN delegate to PM, a 6-decade view of Manmohan. World leaders mourn loss of a true friend. Former PM's life, a reflection of India's resilient spirit, PM Modi. So that was all about that. Tales of former PM humility echo in the corridors of power. Village in Pakistan recalls fond memories of Mohana. Now what do we have here? Prime Minister, great economist, a great atheist. Making policy for the last man in the queue is what he did. That is what Subbarai writes. An emblem for the India story. Manmohan Singh's life's work are entwined with post-independence India's transformation from a poor country to a global power. And he cannot be forgotten, right? Reformist leader who was in step with history. This is what Ajit Ranade writes, right? Now what do we have? Another paper, which is the Times of India, right? Also has lots of good stuff to say about Manmohan Singh, and they should be burning the current government. Congress demands memorial for MNS, committed to building one government, one government. Then what do you have? He has something in between, I think, for sure, where I'd read. India's development priorities were key to Manmohan's foreign policy, and that's what's important to remember, right? He always thought of India first, right? And how strange that the day of his death, the key 2611 plotter Makai dies of heart attack in Lahore. How amazing is that? The guy who actually then created all these stories about a weak prime minister because we didn't respond to Pakistan after the Bombay attack. He's dead too. Wow. Did anybody see that, right? Did anybody see the coincidence? Man who saw tomorrow. He was a very good at dialogue, building consensus. MMS could be brutally candid if he trusted you. He combined courage, vision, and humility. And humility is what is lacking. And when I was jailed, he offered aid to my kids. This is Anwar Ibrahim. That's kind of a very interesting story, right? And a story that must be remembered by all, right? Change is so 90s, 10 lost reforms, okay? And that's what Times of India writes. And let's see what we have on Hindu. I get 4 papers. He says, Manmohan's funeral, Congress demands rights at memorial site. Ex-Prime Minister stood out for his gentle demeanor. Former students. Wow. Ex-PM was against graft. Always thought about India, says Hazare. Now, this is a guy who actually ran and called him the most corrupt Prime Minister, right? He revived the economy with a magician's touch, says Anthony. Manmohan Singh played a role in getting Tamil declared a classical language, writes Stalin. When Manmohan Singh demonstrated his negotiating skills in Tamil Nadu, that was a very interesting time too, right? So all in all, folks, Manmohan Singh work profoundly shaped India's destiny. Indian visionary dedicated to regional peace. South Asia leaders on Manmohan. Leaders of neighboring countries remembered former Prime Minister, former Afghan President Karzai recalls the guidance offered by him. Former Sri Lankan President Ranil Wickremesinghe pays respect at his home. Pakistan's Deputy PM Ishq Dar recalls his role in improving relations. Manmohan, an outstanding statesman, says Putin. Go figure that. Prime Minister Anwar calls him my mitra, my bhai. Gar village in Pakistan mourns it Mona. Wow. Manmohan was humility personified. Criticism did not deter him. TK Nair. Former PM adopted policies that he believed were in India's interest. That's the CPIM. History will count Dr. Singh as a founding father of modern India. That's Praveen Chakravarti. So look, I say, all this is happening. The man was accused of a weak rupee. You look at what's happening. Rupee rattle. Currency hits fresh record low of 85.40. Now this is news all over. And guys, anybody who thinks that it's got to do with the Fed, better think again, because it's essentially got to do about fundamentals of Indian economics. The demand for the dollar is at an all-time high. Not enough dollars flowing into India either through FDI or FII or exports. So folks, unfortunately, where we stand today, we have, I think, the gentlest, most people's prime minister that we've ever had. We've lost. Unfortunately, during his 10 years, a lot of people, including the media and the corporate and the opposition, constantly abused him and called him a puppet, and that was anything but true. Anything but true. Three cheers, Jai Hind, and Wahe Guru Ji ka Khalsa, Wahe Guru Ji ki Fateh for Sardar Manmohan Singh. He took India to the top and made us sit at the highest table that we are sitting at